Hey guys, welcome back to the next part of our series. Today we're going to be talking about the basics of animation inside of Maya. So let's go. Now, before we jump into Maya, I just want to take a quick detour to give you a little bit of an overview of the history of animation. It's just very brief. One of the first videos that we have is called Gertie the Dinosaur. You probably heard about this guy right here. This is considered one of the first shorts in traditional animation. And Gertie the Dinosaur was made in 1914, so more than 100 years ago, by Winsor McCay. Now, this is a very interesting thing. You can look, of course, the video on YouTube and you're going to be able to find it. And it's very funny because there was no sound, of course, and Gertie is actually a pretty nice animation. You're going to see that the drawings, the animations, the movements, everything looks pretty good, even though the principles of animations and animation as a whole was just beginning. So artists back then knew that by modifying the way, or by creating a sequence of images that slowly progress through an action, they were able to simulate movement. And this gave birth to animation as we know it. Now, of course, we have Disney, who created a huge empire with their cinematography and their movies. And they were the first guys to do a long or a feature film, Snow White. So Snow White was the first long feature film done in traditional animation, of course by Disney. He received an honorary Oscar thanks to the achievement that he was able to accomplish, not by himself, of course, with a huge team, but it's very interesting because thanks to this, well, we're here today, right? Thanks to the beginnings of animation almost 100 years ago, we're now animating in computers, right? So the reason I want to mention Snow White is there were two guys right around the age of Snow White and on the golden age of Disney with like Pinocchio. I don't remember all of the other movies, but golden age Disney. It's like, yeah, Pinocchio, Snow White, Fantasia, Dumbo, Bambi. And the two animators that I'm talking about are called Frank Thomas. I almost forgot. Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston. And Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, these two gentlemen right here, they wrote one book that's considered one of the two Bibles in the animation industry. I, again, strongly recommend if you can get your hands on it. It's a really great read. And it's called The Illusion of Life. And this guy's coined something called the 12 Principles of Animation. And the 12 principles of animation are a series of steps or a series of rules that we follow to make sure that our animations look as good as they can be. Now, I'm not going to go deep into theory. I don't want to just bore you with all the ins and outs of all these different principles. There's a lot of information out there as well. But we're going to be taking a look at these principles through examples. We're going to be using these principles inside of our animations, and we're going to be applying them to all the different exercises that we're going to be doing. Several years later came another guy by the name Richard Williams. And Richard Williams became famous because he was the guy that animated, or he was the lead animator in the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And it was a milestone as well, because that was one of the first movies that created an environment where real actors and cartoons were working together, right? So it's kind of like the beginnings of live action and VFX coming together. And this guy also wrote a book that's very famous called The Animator's Survival Kit. We're going to be taking some information from this book as well throughout the exercises. This is a little bit more technical. It's a more technical book. You're going to see exercises and diagrams that explain how you should or shouldn't animate certain things. But what I want you guys to remember is that all of these things, both for the Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston's book and this guy, they're just they're not like hard-coded rules. They're suggestions. They're principles that work really well, but we're welcome to modify them, like the quote says, right? Like, you learn the rules and then you break them in regards to art, of course. So that's what we're gonna be doing. We're gonna be learning the basics of animation, and then we're gonna be breaking them to create some very intense stuff. So if you can get your hands on any of these two books, that's gonna be great. If you want to become a great animator, you're definitely gonna need them eventually, so make sure to check them out. Now, going back into Maya, of course, in the history, eventually Pixar came along. They created like computer graphics. There was a lot of, well, they didn't create computer graphics, but they pioneered computer graphics used for 3D animation, Toy Story, the whole deal. So Maya is, of course, one of the industry standards that we use to create things, to create animations. And the way it works is extremely, extremely simple. You're going to create an object, and every object inside of Maya is going to have transformations, translations, rotations, scales. And down here, we're going to have the time slider. Now, if your window does not look like this, you can always just go here and change into Maya Classic. That's the one that I use. Some people like going into like the animation section, which adds like a couple of other things here and there. I'm going to be working on Maya Classic just to make sure that we're all on the same page. And if for some reason you're not seeing this guys down here, the time slider, the time range, the code, you can go into display. And I'm sorry, Windows. No, it is display. I always mess this guys up. Here, Windows, UI, Elements, and just make sure everything's turned on, and you're gonna have everything here. So if you position your mouse in any frame, let's say frame 1, you select your object, move it to a point in space, and press the letter S. You're gonna set a keyframe, and that will save this information, the translation information of the object at this specific time. See, in frame number 1. Now, if I move my element all the way to my frame 120, and I move this guy over here, you're gonna see that the color changes. It's like a light pink. And when I press S again, it goes into red, indicating that this is a keyframe. There is a set animation at this specific point. Any other point in between, as you can see here, is not going to be a keyframe. It's going to be an in-between. That's what they're called. And you're going to see that there's no specific set frame. There is a value there, but there's no specific keyframe. So you're not going to have anything on your timeline. Now, what Maya does, and this is why 3D animation is so amazing and it simplifies a lot of work, is instead of us having to go frame by frame positioning the element, Maya interpolates the position and it creates a gradient in regards to the value that changes the position from one point to the other. And if I were to hit play over here, you're gonna see how the animation runs at real time. Now, to make sure that your animation is running in real time, you need to have this little thing turned on over here, which is your frame count. And that one you can turn on here in the display, heads-up display, frame rate. And this is very important because if you play your animation and you see that you're not getting a consistent or close to consistent 24 frames per second, that means that your computer is not actually running the animation in real time. And once you render, it might look different. I'm going to teach you ways to avoid that. Later on, we're going to have animations that are going to be a little bit heavier, and we're going to have to use those techniques because otherwise it will be impossible. If you were doing like simulation or like a lot of characters or elements at the same time, we would definitely need to do something called a play blast, which we're going to touch on later on. Now, an object, we can interrupt any part of the animation. Let's say the point here 60, move the object up, for instance, hit S again to create a new keyframe here. And if we play now, Maya is now gonna interpolate this new position. So it's gonna say, okay, you want me to move it here in 60 frames and then down here in another 60 frames. And as you can see, it makes it look very, very cool, right? So this is the secret to animation. We're gonna be positioning our objects in different points in space, in different translations, different rotations, different scales, and then we're gonna be utilizing all the principles of animation to create something very, very interesting. So for our first exercise, this is going to be very simple just to get ourselves acquainted or get ourselves used to the way these things work. We're going to create a new scene here, and we're going to do a simple bouncing ball animation. Now we're going to start with a very simple just up and down bouncing ball animation, and then on the next video we're going to do something a little bit more interesting. So you're going to start by creating a sphere here. I'm going to change the name of the sphere to bouncing ball. Then I'm gonna go to the front view and I'm gonna move my bouncing ball to the top here so that it's sitting right on top of the floor. There's something very important that we're gonna do. Pivot points are very, very important in animation because the pivot point will tell us where the object is gonna be animating from. So in this case, I wanna move the pivot point of this bouncing ball down. So I'm gonna go to my letter D, and then with my letter V, I'm gonna move this all the way down so that it snaps to the last vertex, that one right there. And then I'm just gonna press W again, and with the letter X, I'm gonna snap the ball right there. So as you can see, this bouncing ball has a translation of 1, and it's right there. I'm gonna delete the history, face transformation, not center pivot, because if we center pivot, we just lose what we just created. I'm gonna keep it right there, and now we can start animating our sphere. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to frame 1, I'm gonna select my sphere, and I'm gonna press S. But I'm not gonna press S here, down here. I'm actually gonna move it up. Let's say about there. I'm just gonna press S. Now, I'm gonna move my points here, and I'm gonna position the sphere on a frame that I think it's gonna just hit the floor. In this case, I'm actually using this chart right here, which you can download. I'm actually gonna leave this on your project files. It's this one right here. The bouncing ball animation is a very, very common animation. So I'm gonna save this chart in our projects. Whenever you wanna save something, you can save it on your source image folder. Let me just give me just 1 second. There we go. There we go. Let's call this bouncing ball animation. So you're gonna have that for yourself as well, or you can just look it up. So on my frame 1, I'm gonna be up here, and then on my frame 7, I'm gonna be down here. Okay, so I can just write here 0, select the sphere, and hit S. So now we have this. Okay, now the next bounce is on frame 12. So I'm gonna go to frame 12, move this guy up, not as high as what we had before. So here, probably a little bit lower. Hit S again to save that information. And then the next point in which I'm gonna touch the ground is gonna be frame 17. You're gonna position your sphere there. You can zero this out to make sure that's perfect. Hit S, and there we go. Then we're gonna jump back up, and that's gonna be frame 21. Again, not super high, just a little bit higher. That's S. And then on frame 25, we're gonna go back to 0. That's gonna be S again. And then on frame 28, we're gonna do a final jump, small jump. And then on frame 31, we're gonna do a final landing right here. There we go. Now, this guy right here is called the range slider, which is gonna show us the range in which we're animating. As you can see, we don't need all of this range right here. So I'm just gonna grab this little square, bring it all the way down to, let's say, like 35. Now, if I press this button, I'm gonna go back, and if I hit play, we got this. Not bad, but not good either, right? Actually, the last frame right there, I think I forgot to add the 31 frame. So I'm gonna say 0, select the sphere, and hit S. So now if we play this out, we got this. So, I mean, it's fine, but it's not looking like a bouncing ball. It's just looking like a very odd ball just falling into the ground. And the reason why we don't have this working properly is because we haven't checked the curves, the animation curves. So right now, Maya is doing its job. It's saying, okay, you want your sphere to be here, and then here, and then here, and then here, and then here, but it doesn't know how we want to achieve that specific action. So if you go into Windows, Animation Editors, and open your graph editor, you're gonna get this window right here. I personally like to dock this window right on top of my elements, so I'm gonna keep it there, but if you wanna keep it floating around, that's totally fine. And the animation or the graph editor is one of those animation secrets that a lot of people miss, or they don't really know how to use it properly. So I'm going to be showing you, not only in this exercise, in all of the other ones, how to get the most out of this. So I'm going to go into my translation Y right here, and this curve right here shows me how Maya is connecting the positions of my sphere. Anytime we see a graph, we need to understand what the X and Y value mean, right? So the X value right here is time, and the Y value is the change in the value of that specific element. So the change in the translation Y of our character. So we start at frame 1 with a value of 13.75, and then we moved all the way to frame 7 to a value of 0. And the way we go through those values, that's what we're gonna be changing. Because right now, this is a very like monotonous curve. We call this a lazy curve. It looks fine for certain things, but for this bouncing ball, it's looking really, really bad. So what I want to do is I want to break this curve. I want to make sure that when the ball falls, we see this like back, snap, right? Like bap. So the thing like just bounces around. So I'm gonna grab this thing right here, and this little button here, a V key. You can also find it on tangents, and it's called break tangent. And what break tangent does is it allows me to split this little like legs that this guy has, and instead of moving one and moving both of them at the same time, I'm gonna be able to move them separately like this. So I'm gonna move them in such a way that they create this very sharp line. And what that will do, as you can see here, is it will hold the high values a little bit longer, and it will then very heavily or very quickly accelerate until it hits this point. And instead of softly going up to the next point, it will very sharply accelerate all the way to this point. Now, very important, the positions are not changing, the keyframes are not changing. The interpolation, or the way in which the keyframes connect, is what we're changing. Got it? So again, we're not changing the keyframes. They're remaining exactly the same. What we're changing is how we get from point A to point B. And this, my friends, is why the graph editor is so important. Now, this one right here, I'm going to break this as well. I'm going to grab one of the little legs, and with middle mouse, I'm just going to move this up. Grab this guy, move this up with middle mouse. Very important that you use middle mouse. If you try using any other mouse, actually, single click works nice as well. I usually use middle mouse. I'm not sure why. It's just, I've just done that that way for a long time. There we go. Now, if we take a look at the animation, look how it appears now. Cool, right? So now the animation, instead of looking very soft, like just up and down, it looks snappier. It looks like it's actually bouncing, like it's like a hardwood floor or something. And this is like a very solid object. And it's just bouncing like back and forth, back and forth. Now we can actually make this thing a little bit nicer. And I'm going to show you how. I'm going to go into translate here. And instead of having this element, I want to have this be a little bit floatier. I want this curve to be a little bit nicer, a little bit broader. However, we can't really scale this little crystal right here. And the reason why we can scale this is because this curve is considered a non-weighted tangent. So I'm going to grab this element, or this curve. I'm going to go into curves, and I'm going to say weighted tangents. Now, all of the little crystals are going to change into squares. And the cool thing about those squares is that we can actually scale them. So I'm going to scale this guy a little bit here. I'm going to scale this little guy a little bit here. I'm going to scale this guy. Oh, not move it, just scale it a little bit there. And scale this guy a little bit here. Now we need to fix a little bit of the tangents here. But what's going to happen, as you would expect, is that it's going to have a little bit more air. Because, again, we're not changing the key poses. Well, we're keeping the value high, and then sharply accelerating until we hit this low value right here. It's very important for me that you guys understand the principle of what we're doing here, because this is the basics of like very, very good animation. If you don't understand why this is happening, just pause the video, go back a little bit, and try to understand that, again, we're not changing the key poses. We're changing how we get from one key pose to the other. And this is thanks to something called the interpolation. We're breaking the tangents, we're weighting the curves, or the curves, and that's allowing us to create this interesting effect where we're able to give a little bit more variance to the way in which this ball bounces. So now, when I hit play, it holds just barely, but just a little bit more up here on the high points, and you're gonna see that our animation is starting to look very, very nice. So I'm going to stop the video right here, guys. This is just the first step on our bouncing ball. We're just creating this little bounce. Make sure that you can get all the way to this point, because on the next video, we're going to be adding a little bit of squash, a little bit of stretch. We're going to be moving the ball around, and where I'm going to be showing you some very nice tools to get a nice clean render out of this. So try to get all the way to this point, guys, and I'll see you back on the next one. Bye-bye.